Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank you all for coming here today, sharing this day with Peter, who's going to defend his PhD thesis this afternoon. We have put some hours into the schedule, so we'll have time to go through your work thoroughly. We have even invited some people to help us with that task. Let's take them from one end. 48 mortals. Maybe we'll just stand up and say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
You don't have to applaud, but you want.
You
can say something a little bit more meaningful. You will say something meaningful, I think.
Now?
Not now, later on. You will try. So, 48 mortals from DTU or from DSU. As professor in energy systems analysis, we focus on the economy of the energy system. Then we have him permit me to have to read your name. Bernhard Wiederhausmann.
Hello, everybody.
Fraunhofer in Germany was working on electrical grids and thermal grids and smart energy systems. And then, of course, we have, last but not least, Peter.
Hello, everyone.
Peter Carnell, who's a professor in energy standards at Aalborg University and who's chairman of the assessment committee. And then, of course, we have Peter Sortens, who will invite us in a few minutes. But let me just go through the practicalities of today. First, I have a few minutes to stand up here and tell you about the practicalities, which is what I'm doing. Then, Peter, you will have about 45 minutes to present your work. Then we will have the coffee break, during which, if any of you guys would like to ask questions to Peter, then you should approach me during the break and say that you want to be allocated a few minutes. So please do that if you have any questions. Otherwise, we are moving on to the assessment committee. One project will start with some comments, some general comments, PhD, as well as some very good questions, no doubt. Bernhard will take over, look into more technical aspects, and lastly, Peter Carnell will wrap up everything and make sure that we have covered every single angle of Peter's thesis. Now, after that is finished, then the department is hosting a reception in another building. Some of us live in that building, so you can just follow us. And at the same time, the assessment committee, they will be taking some time on their own, where they will assess Peter's work and write the final words on the verbal or on the written communication that need to give to the faculty regarding Peter. And we will be anxiously awaiting their verdict at the same time. But that all takes place in the adjoining building, Vesterhavn, in case you're familiar with the area. But without further ado, I will leave the floor to you, Peter.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to see so many people here today. What I'm going to talk about is the bidding and operation strategies in future energy markets and just the transition of small district heating plants into market-based smart energy system. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's the title of my PhD thesis. And it's based mainly on 3 published papers, which you can see here. But there's a few other analysis part of this that's not in these papers, so you have to go directly to the thesis for that. But this is the main publications. So just what I will talk to about. First, we introduce what we talk about, go to research questions, we go to the methods, then we look into the future, and then we ask about what can we learn from the current Danish system and what can we learn from the current German system, and then we go to some policy recommendation. And then at the end, of course, we conclude and we look into what else can be done further. So first introduction. So just to make sure everyone is on the same page, what is CHP? Well, simply put, CHP is when we take a power station and we utilize the fact that we produce a whole lot of heat while we produce electric power. So basically we go to a much more efficient system for our traditional system, so much more the CHP system. You can see we can have a very big drop in the fuel use. So basically, traditionally, CHP has been used to make a much more overall system efficiency. But of course, in order to utilize the heat, we have to have some sort of way, a need for it. I mean, there has to be a local need, otherwise, I mean, there's no point in utilizing the heat. So it can either be that you have a household where you have a very micro CHP, or it can be an institution has several buildings and you have a bigger, or it can be an industry. But it could also be a district heating grid, district heating network. So I'm part of my project is part of the 4th generation research center, district heating research center. Which work with this district heating and looking into where does district heating evolve to. And district heating started in the late 1800s, and it was originally steam-based. But over time it's changed and it's become much lower temperatures in the grid, because of course when you distribute steam, you have a big loss, so we want this loss to be reduced in the grid. But also so we can see that the temperature level here, we go from the 1st generation to the 4th generation, we have a decrease here. It's probably difficult to see in this one, but in the temperature level, so we go from above 200 to around 50 to 60 in the future, and right now we're probably below 100, somewhere below 100, depending on where we are. But it also gives some new opportunities when we have these lower temperatures, because we can utilize completely different new sources of energy we could not use before, simply because they become available because they were only at this low temperature before. So we can use them much more efficiently also. So that opens up for that we go from having very simple structures to much more complicated district heating structures with a lot of different sources, where we have to also adhere to the wind power, for example, which can be an input by electricity into a heat pump or electric boiler that we can then utilize. So we also have to understand district heating going forward much more in the context of the remaining energy system, a much more holistic approach. So that's also sometimes referred to as the smart energy system, which is also, you could probably see in the title of my thesis, was also part of that. So this is an example of how a holistic smart energy system approach could look like, where you have some resources here, some solar, wind, and then you have some conversion, you have some relations you can change around. Use the heat pump to take electricity and produce some heat with a lower temperature source. And you can have some storage in it, and then you look at demands. And you have to understand the whole system in this regard, in this smart energy system approach. And you can ask yourself, well, why do we need this? It seems very complicated. Well, we kind of need it because we are looking into a future where we install much more variable renewable energy sources. We install a lot more wind power, we install a lot more solar. So this is the global installed capacity of variable renewable energy sources. The blue is wind power, and the yellow-orange color, that's solar. So this is the worldwide perspective. You can see there's a very dramatic increase of capacity worldwide. And of course, as you can probably already guess, wind produces when there's wind, and solar produces when there's solar. That's fine, but in an electricity system, we need the production and the consumption to balance in each time period. So when we have a structure like this, where we have the blue here is the wind, yellow, you probably see, is photovoltaic, and the red here, that's our electricity consumption. Well, then we need some capacity here, or we need this one to reduce here, for example. And then we could probably take some of this and use for something else. I mean, increasing here the demand, for example. That could be one way of understanding it. So that's why we need it. We need to understand this much more synergies and flexibilities we can achieve by a much more holistic approach. So maybe take this one more. So what I'm looking into is, well, in the district heating, if we have to have production units, we have to produce with the CHP, for example. If we produce with CHP, well, then we can help here, for example, with the lack of electricity from the renewable variable sources as they become more dominant. But right now, at least especially in Denmark, a lot of these small CHP plants have some issues because they're producing very few hours, and they're experiencing some problems with the economic feasibility, and that's a problem because a lot of them have to be reinvested. So you really still need this capacity. If you really want this capacity to continue, I mean, someone should look into, well, how do we then increase the feasibility of them? So going to the research question, basically it says hypothesis of this thesis is that we have to understand CHP a bit differently. We have to go from understanding it only as reducing the fuel use to also understanding as both reducing fuel use, but also helping with integrating renewables by the fact that it can produce when we don't have the wind. So it has the capacity to help us in that situations. And then I have some research questions. I won't detail them here, but basically to just go from asking what capacity do we even need these small scale CHP plants in district heating in the future, and what can we learn from Denmark and Germany in the current setup, and how can we then set up some balancing to help integrate renewable and use the small scale CHP in effective way. So let's skip to methodology. So I utilize a case study for each country. So I've taken Denmark and taken Germany because they both have already integrated a fairly high, relative high share of variable renewable energy sources. A bit differently, Denmark is very heavily based on wind, and Germany is more solar, but also have a high degree of wind in the system. So it's two different cases and have different aspects going forward. Germany has a high share of nuclear still, which is going to be completely outphased into 2022 if the current goals are to be fulfilled. So for each country, I simulate a case plant in order to understand it more deeply what goes into for a small CHP plant, into the balancing and what is expected of them, and are the current rules in these countries actually good for helping with the balancing of the small. I use two different tools. Some of you probably know these already. Energy plan simulation tool for energy system. I use that when I go forward because in order to understand the needs in the future, I have to understand what could be a possible scenario for the future. And I use Energy Pro, which is a simulation tool for energy plants, and I use that to simulate these specific case plants. And then I make some adjustments in the operation strategy in order to simulate these different conditions in these countries. But now talk a bit about balancing. So how is that done in market-based system? Well, I differentiate between two different types of energy markets. What I call the wholesale electricity and the balancing resource. These markets here, that's where most energy is traded. So that's where Dong goes out and sells, and that's where Northern sells most of its electricity. It's traded in these markets here. And for the most part, it's traded day ahead, meaning you trade today for tomorrow. So this is this market. And that's where the participants themselves figure out what is the supply, what is the demand, and then they meet for that. The balancing reserves here are different in that they are only there in order to facilitate that we always have this balance between supply and demand. So they're there to make sure that what we expected to happen here actually is that we actually balance what happens here, because when we expect something for tomorrow, well, who knows what the demand is and who knows exactly what the production of wind is, for example, in the coming days. Well, we have an idea, but we don't know for certain. And some of the things we do here is then to make sure that this balance and it fits, supply and demand fits. And also these are then purchased by the system responsible party. In Denmark, that's Energinet EK, and in Germany, that's the 4 TSOs, transmission system operators. So they purchase these 3 types of reserves. I'll not detail them a lot, but basically there's a primary, which is the first responder. If there's any imbalance, this is the one that responds first. It's then taken over by the secondary, and then you can probably figure out this is then taken over afterward, if it's longer, by the tertiary. So that also means that this is a very small market, and these two are there's much more energy in these markets than in this market. So looking into the future, I will first start by going backwards, because that's sometimes a good idea. First of all, we should understand that how we understand and operate CHPs, that has changed over the years. And it's changed with the market condition of and a specific organization and the subsidy structure we have had. We can talk about a 5-stage development, starting with a fixed price, meaning you get paid a certain amount to pay regardless of when you produce. It doesn't matter if you produce here or here, we pay the same amount. So that's what we can call the first stage that happened. And it's a very easy thing If you cannot read this, this is heat production, and the black line is the heat demand in our district heating grid. This is electricity production, and here we have thermal storage, where we put in the heat that we have produced too much, so we put it in here. So it's a very easy system because it doesn't matter when we produce wind and CSP, because we just produce until there's no more room for storage, shut off the engine, then start again when we have some room. Because economic-wise, it doesn't really matter a lot to us. Then stage 2 is a bit more complicated. We changed it to that the tariff structure depends. We get paid depending on when we are. So we know that some year periods we have a high demand for electricity. So when in the daytime it's higher demand in the nighttime, for example, because industry is starting up. So we know that electricity is more valuable here. So this is an example of the Danish treble tariff, which is still used for some plants, at least for a little while longer, where the price is highest here in this period, and a bit lower here, and low here. So we operate our CHP units where it's most valuable for the system, and then in the hours where we do not get a lot, and we do not have anything in our storage to use, we utilize our boiler. So it puts in a bit more boiler production in this situation. And then we go to this more market-based situation where we trade electricity on the market, and the price could vary for each hour, but it also means we don't know when are the good hours and when are the well-paid hours. In the tariff structure, we knew maybe 3 months in advance at 8 o'clock on Saturday the 3rd, it will be a good price, something like that. But here we do not know. It becomes a bit more complicated for us, and we have to utilize the storage to a higher degree. But it also adds a bit more boiler production in this example. Stage 4, well, then it's basically the same step 3. The only difference is that now it's much more influenced the prices by variable renewable energy sources. This is what you will see a lot of the Danish plants are in the situation here. And the stage 5 is what I'm looking to. And that's where we both have this, where the prices vary over time, the wholesale, but also that the small scale CHP helps participates in the balancing of the electricity system in these balancing reserves. And this here is a wholesale trading, and the one that's a bit off-colored, that's CHP in the balancing reserve. So you can probably see that this is the same hour week. You can see there comes a lot more production on a CHP unit, but it also becomes a bit more of a complex situation of production. And we get more use out of our storage in this way. So that was a bit about how it has been developed. You will see a few plants in Denmark, at least, on this one still, and also a few in Germany on this one. But it's not something that's very common. So looking forward, asking ourselves, well, maybe we don't need small scale CHP at district heating level any longer. Maybe that's just a thing of the past because the wind power is going to produce most of it. So what I've tried to understand is, well, how can we then understand this in the future, and how should it be understood in comparison to the rest of the energy system? And I take the part in an already existing project called CESA, which was made by a number of different research institutions in Denmark, and they asked the question, how can Denmark in 2050 be 100% renewable? So this is a scenario, the recommended scenario, where they figure out, come up with an idea of how could that system look like, what inputs and what transmissions should be, what should happen in the system to reach this. And you'll probably see, if you not read it, this is electricity, the blue one, the green is biomass, and the red, that's heating. And you can probably see there's a quite substantial amount of wind power here in the system. We also have some solar thermal, geothermal, and biomass coming in. And this here, that's our district heating segment. So that's both the large and the small. And you can see a whole different range of inputs coming into the system. So we get some heat out, and we get some electricity out. So we still have some CHP at least, we can see that, because otherwise we wouldn't get electricity out of it again. So looking in a bit more detail on what I focus on, and that's the flexible small CHP plants at district heating levels. How do they operate, and how often do they operate, and how much do they actually produce? And that can kind of be seen here. This is a load duration curve. Some of you can read it, some of you probably can't. But this out here is our hours of production. It is not the hour in the year, it is the amount of your hour through a year. And up here we have percent of the total capacity in our system. So you can see here at around 1,000 hours, we have around 100% load. So that means 100% load for 1,000 hours. But then it drops very dramatically or quickly to around here, around 1,900 hours at 50%. And that's a bit uncommon compared to what you see now, because if you build a CSP unit now, you probably like to see at least 2,000 or 3,000 hours, probably more, for it to be a little feasible solution for you. But that's going to change, it seems like, based on these numbers at least, and that is that we don't really need the energy to the same extent in the system. We need the capacity, because we still have around 1,000 hours where we need the full capacity. But that's only 1,000 hours. The rest of the time we don't need that much actually. So that makes a shift, because suddenly we have to understand that CSP is not just for the energy purpose, it's also for the capacity and having the capacity ready. But that also means, of course, we have to figure out which hours are we then most valuable to the system. We have to find these 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours, depending on how efficient we are. So let's go to some bit about Denmark. Most of you are from Denmark, so probably, and a lot of you work also in the energy industry, so I guess you know this. We have had this development from a very centralized structure, with the red dots here, to a more decentralized structure here, where you see all these yellow spots, that's small district heating plants. And all the green, that's wind turbines. So we have this shift. And the question for the Danish, and what I also said earlier, is what will this look like in the future? Especially after 2018, because there's a subsidy that's going to be removed. You can also see that here on the production that we've had this change. The red here is the large CSP, and the blue is large power production. And we have the wind turbines that come in here and increase production over time. And then mostly removed power plant production from this figure, at least it seems. But the green here, which is what I'm focused on, the small CSP units, they've actually also experienced a decrease in the last couple of years, alongside this increase of wind turbines. And so we're going to have to say, okay, maybe it's just because we have started removing some of these plants. Well, actually, we have not. We removed some of the large power plants. They have started to remove here. I should say this is 2013, so that's actually a bit old. But it's the newest that's available in the statistics. But this here is actually the same. So the small CSP units has the same capacity, you just have a decreased production here. So we have to look into the prices on the market to figure it out. And Denmark is part of what we call Nord Pool Spot. It's a wholesale market, and it covers the Scandinavian countries and the Baltic countries. And in that, most electricity traded around 80–85% is traded of the consumption in that area. So this is the main market for it. And you can see here the prices. There's the system price, which is the overall price for the whole system of Nord Pool. And then we have Western Denmark and Eastern Denmark. And you can see here, regardless of which part you look at basically, that especially since 2011, we've seen a very sharp decrease. And especially in 2015, there's been a very interesting decrease. Very sharp decrease. We've not had a price that low ever for this. So that kind of tells a picture. And remember, my production figure starts in 2013, so that's here. And that was even higher prices. So I guess we can expect that production will drop even more in the next numbers when they come out. So the question then is there anything we can save by going, can we help these plants by going more into the balancing research? Because they're generally better paid, because we also have higher demands on flexibility and availability on these units. And they are very flexible and they are very available. So they will fit actually fairly good in the balancing reserve. In Denmark, we deal with mostly in what we call the tertiary control reserve. And I'm not going into detail with this, but it's an hourly market, so it occurs very often. And I've then simulated a case plan for this, where I use Ringkøbing district heating, which you can see here. This is where they have the engine and they have the natural gas boilers. It's mostly based on natural gas, and it has some big storage units here, but also have a lot of solar thermal in their system. So this is a bit more of what we call these complex future plans, where we have a bit different sources coming in, and some of them are a bit more unpredictable or variable than others. And already they're participating in Nord Pool and the Territorial Control Reserve, so we know they are able to do that right now. So they are kind of at what we can call the stage 5 development. And if you want more about the simulation, you can go to one of the papers. So let's just go to the findings. First of all, we can find an improved economy for the CHP unit and an increased operation when we go to these Territorial Control Reserve and both participate there and the wholesale. But we have a risk here, and that is because we have such a high degree of solar. I mean, it's 22 megawatt. In a summer situation, we have around 5 megawatt of heat consumption. So we have a very big difference. So if we predict wrongly, we have a risk, and we have to commit to a production on the market where we can produce the electricity, but we cannot use the heat. So that's the risk. I mean, we have a risk of reducing our overall system efficiency of CHP. But also, when we conduct trading on more markets, we can kind of make up for some of our problems with these forecasts, because we can trade multiple times, so we can make up for it. So that's a bit of Denmark. Going to Germany. Germany is a bit different system. As you can probably see here, it's mainly based on coal and lignite, so very high degree. It's decreasing, but it's not that decreasing that much actually. But nuclear has had a very big role, but it's diminishing, and it's gonna actually go up completely. And that's a fairly big production that we basically want to remove over time at least. That's at least the current political goals. Political goals is always up for change. But we also see an increase in wind power production here. This is this one here. And solar, this is this one. So you see there is some renewable, and we have some biomass coming in also. And where I focus on is then these gas plants. Well, they're part of it at least, of this gas. And you can probably also see a bit here that the gas is reducing a bit here. And it's probably going to be even more clear if we had more years. So they have a bit of the same problems, not to the same extent as we've seen in Denmark. So again, is the capacity? No, it's not the capacity. We still have the same capacity of gas in the system. And also here we have this increasing wind, increasing solar. Again, it's the prices. Germany is part of a different market setup. It's called APEX, and it covers Germany, France, Austria, and Switzerland. But Germany and Austria has its own price area. So this is the price for those areas. And you can see again, I have some very high prices here, and then since 2011 about, we've seen a decrease. But we're not seeing the same decrease here in 2015. But we still see a decrease. So still tendencies we can find. And if we had the European numbers, same tendency. In Germany, again, going on, well, can we then earn a bit more, keep them alive a bit longer, and make it a bit more interesting to have these small units by going into a balancing reserve. Germany do a bit differently. They use a secondary control reserve. That's a weekly market where you trade on a Wednesday for the coming Monday till Sunday. So that means you have to understand in that some days in advance what is my demand and what can I actually provide. And then you have to, you're kind of bound by your bid at that time. So again, one case plan based on natural gas, an engine, boiler, thermal storage unit, and simulated for 2013. And I find that there is actually an economic gain. The exact size of this gain is a bit problematic because of the payment structure, which is a pay-as-bid structure where you can probably guess what you bid is what you get paid. And the bid's different because often you will see what we call a margin structure where the most expensive units set the price for everyone else. So this is a bit different, and it's a bit different exactly to say exactly how much we can gain from this, but we can gain some benefit from economically from going into this market. But there is some problems with the current rules, tender rules for Germany in the secondary reserve, as this is the main balancing market. And that is, it's a weak tender with this locked activation, and that means we have to understand our situation much better in the coming weeks. And also this pay-as-bid settlement complicates a bit for a small player because the optimal strategy is a bit difficult exactly to pinpoint for a small player. So that was some of the findings from these existing. So going forward, policy recommendations. Well, I kind of said a bit already in the German case especially, and that is we need to organize these balancing reserves so that we can utilize our small CHP plants much better in these markets. And basically we have to set the rules in a way that it provides much more flexible participation for these plants. And this is just 5 examples of what I found that this was important. That is to set the gate closure for bit very close to the delivery, because they will have a much better understanding of their local situation, heat demand and production-wise, the closer we get to the operational. Keep the delivery period short as possible. Again, same situation, the closer we are to the delivery, the better. Avoid the pay-as-bid, no discussion. Keep the minimum capacity as low as possible, because when you have this, I mean, you kind of make it easier for bigger companies to dominate when you have a high minimum requirement, and make that balancing asymmetric. Again, flexible asymmetric, meaning we can deliver either way, we don't have to deliver both ways. So now I talk a lot about these balancing reserves and how we can earn more money. Well, will they save them? Well, we can probably find, in the simulation, I found around 8,000 euro per megawatt installed capacity per year we can gain extra. But we have to remember that this is a one case plan I studied, and the volume, trading volume, is around 2 to 3% of the wholesale. So it's a very small market we're dealing with. And the problem also is that the demand doesn't matter how much we supply and what price it is. The demand is not going to change depending on the supply. The demand is set by the imbalances and the expectations to the imbalances in the system, mainly, in principle. So if we put in a lot of supply, most likely the price will decrease in these markets when they're small, and then we have a supply that's not going to change. And we actually have an example of that. This is an example of the Danish primary reserve market, which in 2009 was changed to a daily auction, meaning it was much more interesting for the small participants to go into it. And a lot of them started building electric boilers. So you can see here, this is the installed electric boiler capacity at the end of the year. And you can see here in 2009, we started seeing a steep increase, and the prices decreased substantially. And it's basically ended up having to stay at this very low level, and no one has really built for here. There's actually been built one more in Denmark this year, electric boiler, but it's built for a different reason. It's built down at Dong, so it's a central one, and it's used as a backup instead of an oil boiler in the Aarhus district heating grid. So it's built for a different reason. That's why I put a different color. But you can see definitely that there is this tendency. We have this increased lot of capacity to a very small market. We have around 280 megawatt, and the market is 20 to 40 megawatt. So going to conclusions and further work, there's 3 overall conclusions. Going forward, we still need these small district heating plants, and we can expect them to use a variety of different technologies, CHP being one of them, but CHP units will operate fewer hours. But we still need the capacity in the system. The balancing research should be organized so that they participate, so it's easy, as flexible, to participate as flexible as possible, because that will make it best facilitate the participation of these small CHP plants. But it should also be noted that they can and they should also participate in this, because it will both help them improve the economy, and it will also reduce the balancing cost for everyone else, but it's not going to save them. We need something else. So that brings me to further work. Well, if that's not going to save them, well, at what level of income can we then say we can expect sufficient CHP capacity going forward compared to what we need and expect to need? And what other options do we have? Do we pay for that capacity, since that's what we kind of started to say we want, we need the capacity? Do we change the tax rules? Do we look at different types of subsidies we could put into it? Or something else? Or maybe we just need to see completely different structure. Maybe the Nord Pool structure or the EPIC structure is simply not good enough as it is. We need to understand that differently and put a different structure in place instead of it. So that's some of the things we could look into more and could be interesting to see. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. And that brings us to the coffee break. And just to remind you, if you have any questions you want to ask Peter later on when we proceed, then please come to me in the coffee break. But otherwise, let's take 15 minutes and start again at 10 to 2.
Isn't it enough? It's just me.
Yeah, one at a time.
One at a time.
Okay. And you can face Peter and face the audience at the same time.
Okay.
But I will leave the floor to you, Peter. Sorry for the
Then I will say. So, Peter, I've got the privilege to be the first one. Yes, and what I'll do is to give a short introduction with some general remarks, and then I move on to some more detailed questions, especially for you. So, and first of all, thank you for a very nice presentation. Clear and well structured and good language and a clear message. So you did really nice. Well done. So and along the same road, thank you for a very nice report. Again, I think it's a very well written report, well structured. You have plenty of good messages in this one. So and it's actually been a nice experience to read it. So it says quite much. So thank you for that one as well. So you have done a nice job, and I think there's plenty of knowledge in this one. So okay, let's move on to the more. No, I have a little more actually. Yes, because I think it's a very relevant theme you have taken as well. So it's not just I suppose it's not just a coincidence you have chosen this issue, because the timing is good. We know for the time being the Danish power plants are under pressure. It goes for the big ones as it goes for the small ones. So something actually needs to be done. So the timing is good. It's highly relevant, and actually it is a burning issue at the time being. We know that this sort of capacity payment for the small ones are running out in 2018. And of course, what are we going to do about it? Something has to be done. And at the same time, we see that the big power plants, as far as I remember, 6 out of 15 of our big combined heater power plants has actually gone out of business or been mothballed within the last 3-4 years. So it's certain we are on a steep decrease actually. So again, something has to happen. So let's move on and look a little bit into the questions for you. And actually, some of them are related to this one, and some of them I've just found out of the blue air. So, but let's start by page 16, where you mentioned both the energy-only market and the capacity market. I would like to hear you explain a little bit about these two markets in detail. Elaborate a little bit on these two markets, and say especially something on how they interact and what happens if one market is entered into the other one. So
okay. And so basically we have two types of way of trading our energy or capacity. So we have the energy only markets, which is what we know now for the wholesale and the Nord Pool and the Apex, and we have what we can call capacity payments or the capacity markets, where we sometimes see that, for example, in the secondary regulation in Germany, the secondary control reserve, you have to offer both. You both get paid for your capacity and for your energy. And this market, you will also need to offer the capacity in order to get the energy payment if you get activated. But there is a situation where you could, in principle, have a situation where you are not required to offer this capacity, but still offer the energy, which is the case of the Danish Territorial Control Reserve.
you know, we're discussing capacity markets in Denmark as well.
Yes.
And we're a little reluctant or going into it. Can you say why?
Well, the risk is that we are overpaying our capacity for our capacity, because in principle the market structure should make up for the fact that some plants are just too expensive to run and too expensive to keep, and if they're not able to earn the money on the energy, well then they will go out of business and some cheaper will come in. So that's the theory in the energy-only market, is that as long as the energy is traded and the energy is paid well then we structured correctly, well then we have the situation where it happens automatically in the energy-only market, which is also what you can say of more or less different commodities. I don't pay my dairy for standing ready to deliver my milk, but I pay for each bottle of milk. So that's the theory behind that in the oil market. So we are basically reluctant because there might be a risk that we have to end up overpaying for something and giving a lot of money for something that we actually didn't need to give.
A less efficient market.
A less efficient market.
So do you know which way are we going in Denmark? We have started taking that step. So
well, the discussion is whether or not we should go into capacity. In the DK called this discussion market model 2.0, I think it's called.
2.0, yes.
2.0. And they want to investigate, well, can we change the market structure right now, and can we look into this capacity payments, and can we make some better incentives for people to be flexible in the market, demand side. And the discussion right now is that, as far as I understand it, in DK is very reluctant for these capacity payments. They're not really happy about them. They prefer not to pay them. But in eastern part of Denmark, they pay for having a certain amount of capacity out of the market so they can activate it in case. I think it's 200 megawatt or something like that. So they do have some capacity payment, but it's mostly on eastern part. And the western part, we have not had that yet.
But it's not really a capacity market in Sea. What do you call it?
Strategic reserve.
Okay, so and what's the difference?
Well, the difference is that in the capacity market, more free capacity market, we could still have these on the energy-only market, and the strategic reserve, we need them to be separated, and then we can activate them just as the balancing reserve in principle can be activated when we need.
Okay. Yeah.
So they will not participate in the wholesale at the same extent.
So would you say that if we introduce a capacity market into the energy-only market, then actually we're entering in some kind of new world of market? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, we have to understand the market differently, and then you can also different. But definitely, I think we will. But how I've not discussed and analyzed further, but we will have to understand the markets and our capacity differently.
Okay, fine. This was only the first question, and I have plenty of them. So. But we have 1.5 hours, don't we? But not from your. So let's move on to page 18. You mentioned these two kinds of settlements.
Yeah.
The marginal price and the price as paid. Yes. Will you say a little about the pros and the cons of the two approaches?
Yeah. So first and foremost, marginal price setting is where the most expensive unit or the last activity sets the price. So then it becomes an incentive for people to the participants to offer into the lowest marginal cost for themselves. So at what point level do I start earning money afterwards? So you keep it very, the price is very low on this market in principle, and everyone knows exactly what to bid in. It's very easy to participate for a small participant because I only have to understand my own situation, my own costs for participating. So that's the marginal one. That's used very extensively. But there is a risk in that, and that is that if you have someone who can exercise market power, if someone can say, okay, I will take one unit out, and then I'll have to activate one of my more expensive units, and then all my other units will also earn this amount. So that's the risk you have in this market, very big risk, and it happened a few times. It happened in California, and it happened in the UK especially, and it's something that I think they also look very closely at in Denmark. Is this a problem? Because we do have Dong as a major player. And the pay-as-bid market is mostly used in the balancing reserves, at least in Europe. UK is different because UK actually functions more of a pay-as-bid system. Pay-as-bid system, you get paid per bid. So in that market, of course, we have to understand we need both to cover our short-term costs, marginal costs, but we also have to cover our fixed costs and potentially some reinvestment or some income extra. So we have to put in a greater bid in that kind of market. But it also means that we either have to understand how many hours do we expect to run, because that will, I mean, we have to then call it out on a certain amount of hours a year. And we have to understand a bit more of, could we maybe put in a bigger bid this year, this hour, and then smaller bid the next hour, and then won both hour instead of losing both hour, 1 hour because we put in a too high bid. So we have to understand much more what all market bids are in this market. And one of the risks, of course, is then that the ones with the most information, the most knowledge, the most amount of manpower is the one who is gonna earn the most in this market. And the ones who are gonna earn the least is the small ones who simply don't have the time to sit and analyze these in details. So that's the risk. The advantage is then it is a very difficult market to play in the same, to exercise market power in the same extent at least than the marginal price, because you can only affect your own bid and the last one.
You know, we are in a situation where the marginal price market is actually getting under pressure.
Yeah.
Because of
the wind turbines and the solar.
Yeah.
And basically because they are in there with very low, 0 or even negative when they have a subsidy attached to them with the bids. So they basically press the price down, and they can then be the price maker, being the most expensive unit. And if there's no one more expensive than you, then you don't earn any money on this market. So that is an issue, and it's an issue that's coming up, and they're starting to talk about that. That's why we don't see these reinvestments, new investments, in especially Norway and Sweden, of wind turbines. It's because the prices are so low due to partly due to this.
But you would not recommend that we exchange the market setting we have today with the marginal approach with a pay as bid?
I'll be very reluctant at least. I'm not saying I think it's necessarily a bad idea. I think it actually could solve some issues, but there is some challenges with it that I think we need to consider when we do it. But maybe if we then put in a separate capacity payment and put that aside and then have this pay as bid for itself, maybe that could be a much more interesting one and much easier for the small participants to come into. But again, the devil is in detail, depends on expecting.
We've seen that before, yes, that's right. Thank you. If we move on to page 34, you have this picture of the duration curve. And actually, I think you mentioned it. You did mention it. It doesn't look too promising, does it?
No.
No. So we have a problem.
Yes.
Yes. So at the present, by now, will a plant with this duration curve be economically feasible with the payment we have until 2018 included?
It's a great question. In principle, I guess it should be feasible to keep them in operation. I mean, that's why we still have them in operation, because they're kind of already seeing this problem, duration curve like this already to some extent. But they're still there. I mean, the capacity is not gone away. I mean, that's still there, and it seems to be there until 2018. And it's probably because of the structure of this capacity payment that it increases with a lower spot market price. So when the spot market price is low, then they then compensate with this capacity payment. So that at least seems to at least keep this in operation. Whether or not it's then too much, that could be argued, because I've heard from some of the plants that they say they could probably deal with a substantial less to cover their fixed cost.
You mentioned that we should be above 2,000 hours, 1,900 hours, I think you said. It had as full load hours by now. So what should we actually, what level should we up to? 2,000, 3,000? Well, it sounds small. It sounds a little in my ears. So I think normally you would say that it should run 3,500 hours, full load hours to be in.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's also the situation, the problem. But we have to also understand, of course, connection to the rest of the system, because we need, I mean, we don't produce electricity just to produce electricity. We produce because we have a need for it. But if something else is producing it, well, then the need is less. And that's kind of what this also shows, because this is a more technical optimization of simulation of the energy system. So we get an idea about, well, we don't need that many hours in the system. So for the system, of course, this is what we would like to see. Then, of course, for the plant, I mean, 3,000, 3,500, and 4,000 hours is what we probably would in order to make it interesting to purchase it. But that's not gonna. I mean, I don't think that's gonna happen in the future, because we do have these high degrees of wind power, solar, and it's only gonna increase with the political will as it is right now.
But how dependent are they on the natural gas price?
That's very dependent. I mean, that's kind of part of the problem they have right now, the small ones. Because they are being bid out by the coal one, because the coal is cheaper, so they're very dependent on the natural gas price. And
they're even worse off now when they have this very, very low power price.
Yeah.
And
And a high natural gas price.
And a high natural
fairly
gas
high.
prices, yes. Was it the solution to convert to biomass?
Well, biomass has some interesting properties, and generally speaking, what I hear is that it depends what you mean by biomass. If you talk about CSP biomass or biomass boilers.
It was actually CSP biomass.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, they're not. It depends a bit because the small ones, I mean, that's very low capacity. In the bigger ones, there could be an idea about doing it, but that's not really something I've looked into. And what I hear is also that it's a bit more inflexible plant. And that's not really what we see we need here. We need to see much more need for flexibility. The small ones, I think it's the same situation. There could be some gasified biomass or some biogas could be relevant, some green gas, some syngas in some way could replace our natural gas. And then we could basically keep this infrastructure we have already and keep this flexible operation of the CHP plants as we have right now. So I think that's much more of an interesting one than talking about directly using biomass. Also because we probably need the biomass for our transportation sector, because we cannot put in a battery in an airplane and then expect that to run on electricity. We need something else for that. So if you're gonna go 100% renewable, we need to use some of the biomass in the transport sector.
One of the reasons that we want to use all of these decentralized power plants in balancing is, of course, to help integrate wind power.
Yeah.
How much do they, if we take the total portfolio of decentralized power plants, how much do they matter in this respect?
Can you please?
Yeah, we want to use decentralized power plants to integrate wind power, absorb and the other way around, that produce when we have no wind. How much do our portfolio of our decentralized power plants matter in that respect?
That depends who you ask, because
No,
if you ask, and that's not something I look deep into, but what the discussion is whether or not we should have this capacity locally and nationally, or whether or not we should expect it to happen in other places in Europe and then move the transmission. And then in the big picture, then these small ones in Denmark is not going to have a big effect if we're going to put out transmission line, and we can, and we are certain that there is some capacity in the other end of the line. I mean, then it's not going to matter a whole lot. But if we're going to understand it differently and we want to make sure that we have the sufficient capacity nationally, I mean, then they start to be interesting, especially from an efficiency point of view, because we cannot expect everyone to connect to the large ones. I mean, in Aalborg, of course, and in the Copenhagen area, we can see these connections, but we cannot expect that to happen out in Language, for example. They will have to have their local plant, and it could be a few connected, but in general, they will have some smaller plants need for that. So it depends on how you see it, but from an efficiency point of view, I think we will have a better deal by doing and using them, and more we can ensure more stable grid connection.
No, we are building quite a number of interconnectors, transmission lines at the time being. So will they make it easier for the decentralized power plants in the future, or will they make it worse?
I think it'll make it more difficult. Simply because we will have a lot more capacity into the system that wasn't there when they were built. And I think that will pressure the price down for a number of years. Because suddenly we compete not only with the large scales in the wind, we also compete maybe with some lignite in Germany. For a number of years, that's probably going to happen. And we compete much more with the hydro in Norway, and we will start to compete with whatever they were built in UK, except for nuclear. So I mean, it's going to be more difficult because the competition is going to be tougher.
So on the capacity?
Yes.
Yes. Well, now we're building a cable to Holland, and we are actually looking into one to the Viking cable to England.
Yes. What
will happen with prices when we open these two?
It's probably going to be more flat. I mean, the price is going to flatten out to a much larger extent. There's a bit different because in Holland they tend to have a higher price because it's based mainly on the natural gas system. So the expectation is the price will increase in Denmark, but and it's also expected with the German, the UK cable, because they also have higher prices. So we do expect a higher price, but I think also we will see a much more flattening of the price because you can to a much larger extent use some cheaper plants before some other plants they have some spare capacity.
And it will influence the balancing as well.
Oh yes. It already has to some extent because one of the new Norwegian cables, part of that is also that we buy our secondary control reserve for western part of Denmark from Norway, meaning we do not use Danish tanks any longer for that. And also part of the primary is also coming from that cable.
Yeah. So it gets cheaper in Denmark.
Yeah, for
balancing.
transmission. Yeah, for balancing, yes.
For balancing, yes.
Yeah.
But the Danish actors,
They are suffering from it.
they're suffering. Okay. Now we actually see this change of biomass in the big plants.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
I don't think so.
I know you haven't touched the big
Yeah,
plants. So it's just,
I can always comment on it. I have a lot of research to back it up. But I can always comment on it. I don't think it's a great idea, simply because we can see we need this flexibility. I can clearly understand why they do it, because it's a great deal right now for them, because they get this extra subsidy on top of not paying taxes of the electricity production. So I can see it's a good deal for them. But I don't think it's a good thing for the system, simply because we put in a lot of capacity that's not really that flexible in all what we need. And also they're built for these long hours of operation. I mean, that's why they can build them. And they're also going to do that because they're going to get, I think it's, 300 krona on top on each megawatt hour they sell to the market. So, I mean, they can operate much lower hours. So we will see them to decrease the price. So I don't think it's a good idea, but I clearly understand why you do it. Because it's set up right now, it's a good deal.
It's a way of surviving. So.
Yeah.
Oh, a specific question. Actually, I think I've touched upon it several times, that you say that there might be cases where we need to reject heat.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? And normally you would say if you reject heat, there should be some kind of cooling possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, so we need some kind of a cooling tower, or in principle we could, if we have solar, we can utilize the solar as a cooling station in the night time. You can run reverse and cool the water down there.
Yeah.
So we either need some cooling tower, or we need to inject it into a river or something like that, as you do with the major ones. But that's not going to happen on the small ones. The small ones are probably going to have like a small way of injecting into the air. And so on.
But the Danish power plants, small scale ones, don't have that, I suppose. So
some of them do, some of them don't.
some of them do. Okay.
Yeah.
Ringkøbing?
They have the solar, so that's what they can.
So they could utilize it for that. So. Yeah. And the German plants you looked into?
Well, that was a case.
I know it was a generic
so
case.
in principle,
yes.
that could happen. Whether or not it does happen, I actually don't know.
So, but it's not included in the investment cost. I don't know how much it cost.
No, I also don't know.
But
it was not included in the investment cost, so you can say, well, that's an investment I've not looked into and understand more thoroughly. But I mean, it was more of an exercise in understanding and saying, well, that's a risk we have to take then. But then we also, if we do this, and we do it to that extent that I've done it, because it's a bit going to the limit of what we would probably do normally. In a normal situation, you're probably a bit more hesitant than I've done in the simulations. But then you also need to make sure that you're always able to reject this heat.
And now we are in this area. You have the Danish and the German case.
Yeah.
Two cases anyhow.
Yeah.
And they're quite different in their rules set up and requirements and so on. Will you try to just give the main differences? I could expect that in some future time we might actually see that balancing will increasingly be international.
Yeah.
And perhaps we will see a more harmonized market.
Yeah.
Could that be the devil's in the detail?
Yeah, that was in the detail.
Try to give a little bit of elaboration on this part.
Yeah. So in Germany, they have a big issue with transmitting energy from the north to the south. They have a bit more. You start with Denmark instead. Denmark is much well connected. We have one TSO, and they want to make sure that everything is connected. So they try to as much as possible. We do have one difference in that there's a western part and the eastern part, and traditionally they're not been that well connected. But there is a very good connection in Denmark between, so we can easily shift it around. Germany is a bit different because we have 4 TSOs, and they operate their own independently, and they operate as a business. So they're also interested in earning money, of course, in this. But they also mean that they're connected. Of course, they collaborate on getting the balancing, but they also have their own grid to maintain. And the maintenance, of course, is different because we have also a tradition of the Eastern Germany and Western Germany. Yeah. But we also now have a situation where the wind power is built in the north, and we shut down a lot of nuclear in the south. So right now there is a problem that getting this wind power from the north to the south, which then has been done partly by going through Poland, Hungary, and in that way around, which is a bit of a way. But
and they're not really happy about it.
No, they're a bit satisfied by that. So right now there's an investment going on in Germany for making a stronger connection between the north and the south. And I think that's also part of why we see this extensive use of the secondary control reserve, because that's much more local activated reserve than in the tertiary control, where we activate that on a national scale or a transnational scale, because it's basically a Scandinavian market. So it could be one in balance in Finland that's handled by a Danish plant. Probably the reverse, but it could be that way. Where in Germany there's much more constraint in the grid, so you need much more of this local balance. I think that's why they use the secondary control reserve to much larger extent.
Okay, yes. So you wouldn't expect that we see a harmonized market in the northern part of Europe just around the corner?
I think it will come, and I think it comes from Europe mainly, but I think also the Danish TSO would like to see much more of collaboration in this. So right now they're moving into connecting Western Denmark much more to the German system, and they want to connect the eastern part much more to the Swedish system and the Norwegian system. So I think we will see this, and I think also we will see these narrow trans-regional areas of balancing to much larger extent than we do now. At some point, maybe even a trans-European, but it's probably way out in the future because of transmission and balancing, organizational rules. So I think we'll see them going forward.
My last question, recommendations on page 86. I think you have them in your head, actually. So these 5 recommendations, you mentioned that we should go this way.
Yeah.
But even taking these recommendations into account wouldn't probably be enough.
Yes.
That was what you said. So,
yeah.
So what should we do? What more can we do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the problem basically is the amount of energy we talk about with this balancing. And that's simply not going to be sufficient, as I see it, for this amount of capacity we need to keep in operation. So this will still make it possible for them, and it will still increase the value of the produced energy we have for them. And it will also reduce our cost as a consumer for balancing energy. But we need to understand it differently, and it could be, in principle, we look into some capacity payment, could be one way. We could look into maybe a bit differently into how we tax Denmark, especially taxation on natural gas extremely high in Germany, and there's nothing on if you have a CHP with a high efficiency. But that, I mean, looking into tax structure, maybe looking into a different approach, a bit of better connection maybe between the heavy locally owned wind turbines, maybe connection with different teams. Like.
Is it a catastrophe if we lose the decentralized power plants and convert them to boilers or what we're going to do?
I'm not sure. I don't like the word catastrophe, but I don't think it's a good idea. And I think it will happen to a large extent. Some will stay alive. Those who reinvest and have high efficiency, I think they will survive the coming years because they can still produce to some extent and still earn some money on it. But the ones very efficient, where we maybe see 1 or 2 hours a year of operation or 10 or something like that, they're going to be removed. And what's going to be replaced is a bit difficult because the Danish situation, of course, there is a very hard legislation that you're not allowed to switch around from natural gas to biomass, which they really want because there's no taxation on that. But so I think we will probably see much more move to see if we can use heat pumps. That's my hope. So I hope for the best. So I hope that we will see someone of the CHP being replaced by heat pumps, but I am not sure.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. I'll leave the floor to you, Anna.
Peter, thank you very much for the nice presentation and also for the work. I have as a backup now, we look at that later.
Okay.
First, I want to draw your view a little bit to the more technical parts. You showed us, you modeled with Energy Pro, with the tool. And my question is, could you explain a little bit what kind of model is spaced below that? So how do you model the energy system below that?
So I model the energy system basically like each component and say we have a CHP unit, this goes in, this goes out.
Okay.
What happens inside, I don't consider.
Okay, but I want to look a little bit what's happening inside the box.
Okay.
So maybe we start what is the model inside of Energy Pro. You can choose a component like the CHP, or you may take the district heating grid, or also the solar collector, or PV system if you want.
Okay.
Just choose one.
Okay. So we can take the CHP.
Okay, nice example.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a fuel coming in, natural gas, and we have some heat coming out and electricity coming out, and it's always connected. So what goes in is what comes out. And in my simulation, I always assume full load, so I don't expect any part load of it in principle, unless the secondary control says there's a difference. And then we say, okay, we always operate either full or not at all in principle. There's some minor things you also probably read. And then we operate it at least for a certain amount of hours, so it could be 3 hours. And then we put in some costs on this and say, okay, the fuel costs this, the taxi station is this, and we settle on electricity on this basis. And then the model goes in and say, okay, in these hours, this is the cheapest, and then we'll start with this and operate on it in principle. So that's a simple principle.
Okay, so your model is more something characteristics, energy and power model. So what could you do if you want to look deeper in the system and look maybe on heating processes, heating up processes? If you want to have it more detailed, the model, what would be the next step to go a little bit deeper into?
Yeah, I mean, you could go in and put in a bit more.
Maybe not in Energy Pro, but in another tool.
Yeah, okay.
So what would you do then? Just on the modeling base.
Yeah, so I'm not so strong in the detail technique. I'm a planner, so I like to see things from the overhead. But if I want to do it in for example, Energy Pro or a different tool, I would go in maybe and ask a bit more about what is my part load efficiency and how about starting, what is the cost more on that, and how much heat do I produce in that regard. Because that will be, of course, important when we then go in and model one where we just start for 1 hour, for example. Then suddenly it becomes much more interesting if it takes 15 minutes to start, how much energy was actually produced in this case. So that's some of the things I would probably.
Okay. Okay. Let's keep this modeling a bit back. You showed us several pictures where you show it's the more components you get in the energy system, the more your question is an optimization question. You started with that the last question to answer it. Could you let's go a little bit to the mathematics and explain what methods you could use for optimization?
Well, I I mean, Energy Pro doesn't really use an optimization tool. It's more an analytical approach. But in principle, I could have used a mixed integer linear optimizer, and then put up the formulas according to that, and then say, okay, find me the lowest cost solution according to my formulas, and then put that to run. So in principle, I could use that instead of doing it.
Okay. What special case on the conditions of the model you would be necessary with a mixed integer? If you name that so directly.
So I would need to understand the cost and the relations between the costs and formalize that. I would need to understand the correlation between the CHP and the other units and their cost structure, and we'll put that up connection to the district heating, our thermal grid, thermal storage, and then accordance to the demand. And we'll say, okay, we need these constraints. We need to make sure that it always fulfills our demand, and we cannot go above this. And then I would go and optimize compared to our costs. So our total heat production cost, net heat production cost.
And your condition should be linear.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe we leave the technical a little bit, and now we can look at this picture. And come a little bit to
this one.
The first one. Yes. So the idea, what we have, so a lot of people say the more fluctuating generators you have in the system, the more reserve power you will need. So, and that the hope is that then prices will increase. I brought the historic price development for the secondary positive reserve. And if you look at this, it starts at 2008 and goes roughly to now. we see, well, at least not an increasing.
Yep.
First, at least we see a decreasing, and I want just maybe the question simply why.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I know. It has a lot of answers also.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the problem, of course, is that you only get the price. So in principle, a lot of things happens underneath. And one of the things that happened in Germany was a much more strong trading scheme. So they went in the 40s, started to much more coordinate there, and we got a larger balance.
Before went to one area.
Exactly. And that reduces the price significantly.
That's clearly what you see here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's done to here. Until here, energy system world was clear, and nothing bad happened. And also not all ideas what could be at the points, at the peaks later. Maybe we have some ideas.
Well, the problem always.
I have some ideas, but I'm not sure why.
I mean, I would be pure guesswork for me if I have to guess these peaks here. I mean, this of course is what I already said, and also that we went from a much more flexible situation where we can trade weekly instead of monthly. And that also will of course reduce the price. But what happens here, I mean, there can be different things. It could be one participant who's normally there went out for some reason, or it could be this in principle. I mean, I don't know what happened here, but in principle, someone could try to game with the system a bit more. So someone might start to see connection here with increasing price, and that could, of course, mean that they try to guess the price. That could also happen. And the problem is, it's very difficult when you see this to exactly say what could happen. But I mean, there could be some specific situation. I don't know.
Yeah, it's similar. I think in this time they had the TSO worked on the prognosis of photovoltaics. Before that, they had a very bad prognosis.
Yeah.
It could be another interpretation. But I want to show there are a lot of variables in the price for the secondary reserve. And you showed us with the system, right now, with the prices right now, you can earn money. You also mentioned, well, if all go in the market, it will decrease.
Yeah.
Well, we need further secondary reserve. Maybe a question. So it's also an open question. What could happen in the future with the price?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, I know.
It depends. It kind of depends, as I see, on and how the connections is going to happen in Germany. So if you're going to see a much broader connection, much stronger connections, I think the price will decrease because we get the opportunity to much more trade, move it around with the existing wholesale market. But because Germany is, of course, one price area, but there are some internal constraints that's partly handled by these balancing reserves. Of course, when we then if you also consider that we have a larger one, and if we even move it even further, because I think they already started to take in Switzerland in the secondary control reserve, and I think also there's some connection with Holland. I'm not entirely certain there. But at least we're going to see some major, bigger areas. I mean, that already shows that, I mean, bigger areas reduces the price because we get a much more large area, get more possibility of balancing our system. And we also see these deep changes less because, of course, in one area we could have one going one way, when you can see in another place one going the other way. So when we see this, I think we will see a decrease in the prices. Of course, as you said, many people argue that more renewable, more balance need. But that's an all thing being equal estimate. So it depends. If we don't change anything and we just put a lot of things in, wind power, I think the price will increase. That's unlikely because, of course, we will try to make sure that the price stays very low as a TSO. Especially, so I think the prices will decrease. I think maybe this here is actually a fairly good thing. What happened? I think it will go a bit up and a bit down depending on when we are. But I don't think we will see an increase here to that extent in that time frame. But we could see these some changes because it's a very small market, generally speaking. So one going out can affect the market price that significantly.
So thanks for answering these open questions, and I'll leave the floor to the next.
Thank you. I'll take all my notes here, so I remember all the questions. You have a lunch pack with you? So Peter, also from me, congratulations with a nice thesis and a good, very good and clear presentation of your arguments. Now we have had the pleasure of listening to questions from the economic side, Paul Erik, and we have had questions on the technical side from Bernhard. And then what am I then supposed to do? So I have, maybe I should have this, you can pick two questions. I'm this political scientist or sociologist or this kind of in between who will ask you a little more about the field you have entered into, because you have dared to enter the complex field of energy system and electricity markets and combine both political, engineering and economics. So I'm also allowed to ask you into this questions into this area. And you have a clear contribution that these CSP plants can contribute with balancing, and they can have a physical role, and they can maybe struggle to find economic positive role for themselves in this by changing the way they trade. You have some policy recommendations for shifting the market rules, and there's no doubt from the debate you have had here with Paul, that you have a really deep understanding of the contextual rules in this present market organization and how the devils and the details, are working here. But one thing you also mentioned in your work that you draw upon something called concrete institute economics, which is a nice concept developed here by some persons in your group, and you try to save yourself by saying that other theoretical discussions of markets are outside the scope of my thesis. Well, I'm here now. Yeah. So you will not save yourself. This will not save you completely from having this question. And so my question is, maybe you can explain a little what is the idea of concrete institutional economics?
Yeah,
just shortly.
Very shortly. I mean, it's basically traditionally in economy, you start as far as I understand on the top, and then you look down and you figure you don't understand the details of what goes on. You just say we have to price and we have to supply and demand, and then we find the price, and then we know that this could be optimal, and then you know maybe that there could be some room for improvement, but you don't understand them and you don't look into them. So in the concrete institutional economy, you say, okay, we have to understand what else happens in there. We have to understand the details of it, and we also have to understand different things like how do we teach people and what kind of education do we give the ones that are actually doing this. So it's a much more detailed understanding and a much more bottom-up approach. Then you start understanding details, and then you understand how you can understand it.
Yes, but you also introduced that this concrete institutional economics is defined by having an historical approach and looking at the political.
Yeah.
So what is this? Can you,
Yeah, I mean you have to understand in the institutional that the market is not something that just come out of thin air. It's something that happened because someone went into it and made the market here, and it happened through the politics in it. It happened through the actors. It happened. The actors participated. It could be a grassroots organization participated in it. It could be a company, and whoever else had the power struggle in that situation, and who came on top probably had this most to say in this market set up as it is. But also understanding, well, when we have this historic context of our market, we can also develop it further to what needs we have in the future and going forward, depending, of course, who participates and who sets the rules and who looks into the details.
Yeah. So this is now we're coming to the group some actors, some interests, and maybe some grassroots. But if we take the ASA, we use the ASA division of the market as an example of a market organization.
Yes.
So first we can ask how many grassroots participated in.
Not many.
But from where? Why is the market organized with a spot market, a balancing, and the reserves?
Yeah.
Why is it? Why is that?
Why is that?
Why is not everything a spot market?
Well, we need it technical. Basically, we need it because we need to respond quickly So we need something that can respond very quickly. And trading wholesale on a very quickly, maybe 30 seconds of startup time, is not that logical that you would have to trade every 30 seconds. I mean, that doesn't really function for the local plants. They would like to know a bit more, how long do we operate to actually deliver this?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the division. I mean, we have division of this is our amount, and then we balance with this amount for filling out some technical requirement of the grid.
And we have the primary reserves, there are some reaction times.
Yeah.
Why is the reaction time changing? So you have the seconds and minutes, and you have a 12-hour ahead, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
why can't I just go and buy immediately without having an impact?
Yeah, I mean, the reason is mostly economies, because when we have 30 seconds operation after start, there are some things we have to do. We have to maybe have the unit in operation in order to be able to very quickly fulfill this amount. So there are some costs associated with that. So if you can move it to some units a bit slower to start, and we can start from the bottom, well, then that's cheaper to have that as a backup for the amounts, and then just the small fluctuation occurring at these a bit more expensive units to have in operation. So it's a cost part of it.
The cost, so now we have there are some political actors with some interests, and also some economics.
Yeah.
But why do we need this balancing? So I'm fishing for a third factor.
I mean, it's a technical part.
No, so it is, if we want to understand what is now shaping the next, if we want to have political recommendation, want to shift the market, reshape the market rules, or the rules for the market organization.
Yeah.
Then we can look for some actors with some interests, and we look for economics as a factor. What about physics?
Yeah, I mean the technical.
Oh,
that was what I meant by sorry for.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now I understand. Yeah, of course. I mean the physical part of it, the technical part of it. I mean there is some restrictions in the grid and the understanding of to fix it, how it functions technically on the technical level. That you also have to adhere to this market structures.
And could you say something about the connection or the linkages between the physical and the prices?
To what extent do you mean?
The technical properties or transmission lines, or
the more demands, I mean, we have on the technical side, I mean, the more or less, the more expensive it's going to be price-wise for us to have it, simply because we probably need some more technical parts.
But you also mentioned here with Bernard that if you increase the area and have more transmission lines, then it affects the prices.
Yes. And that happens because, I mean, we can then utilize different uses of capacity we couldn't use before. So maybe we have some capacity in another place that wasn't utilized for our market because it was simply not demand there. But now we can then utilize because we have this extra strong connection to it. So that's the principle. I mean, and then we will then have some other ones that's not part of it. So that's the principle of what will happen in this transmission line.
So how? Yeah. So this the market is organized as a sort of compromises between some technical aspects and economic aspects, and some political desires to have markets in particular ways.
Yes.
So if we look at these three factors, would you then say that it's enough to talk about historical and political factors in the concrete institutional?
No. We also need, of course, the physics and the technical specifics, and we need to understand that. We need to understand that to a very high degree in order to make sure that we can fulfill the technical needs of our physical world.
Is that something, a normal understanding in an economic textbook?
Not to my understanding, no. I had economics, but I was with Frede, who mostly talk about institutional economy. So not. But what I understand is that economists, they don't understand the details of the physical and the technical part of it. They only understand there's some economic overall rules, and then they put them depending on what situation they're in.
So we need to, if we want to understand the reshaping of market rules, we need to understand how this kind of ideals of economics and ideals of physics or factors are, in a sense, negotiated together in this
structure. Yeah.
Okay, that's very nice. Then I'm looking forward to this, because this maybe you meant that in your some of your words and you call it technical, but I think this is a much stronger expression you have of this now. So I think this is that were the hopes. Very good. Then the other thing I have here on this side is what other elements are part of this term institutional? Because if you mentioned that there are political and historical factors, but you also have this. You want to emphasize that we need to shift the understanding of what the decentralized power plants can do in the system.
Yeah.
Is that also? Can you elaborate a little on what you mean about understanding, and then how this understanding stuff can be part of the institutional?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the understanding comes down to how do we see them when we model things, and how do we see them when we put them into our big pictures of things. And what traditionally has happened is that when we talk when we get a DK, when we talk when we get a DK, traditionally, the small CHP plants have just been saying, okay, well, most of these is just producing depending on heat demand, so we cannot use them that flexible, and that has been the view of the understanding of these CHP plants. And what I'm saying is, well, we shouldn't understand it as only that, and because the understanding was also, of course, that they increase the system efficiency, but we should also understand them as a flexible source and a flexible potential for us to much more integrate and much more flexible in the approach to the market and to the remaining energy system.
Yeah. So, but you don't. You talk about understanding, but you don't link it strongly to the term institutional context.
No.
So it would be. Have you heard about the paradigms, or you know?
A bit, yeah.
So maybe it could be. Maybe make this important point stronger by saying that the existing energy system has within the institutional context strong paradigms of knowledge that see plants in different categories that can be, you know, problematic for the transition.
Yeah.
So if we make stronger that they are trapped in paradigms, you say, in a sense, it's a problem if we don't make a revolution in our thinking about this plant. We can not only make a shift in the plant, but also in the way we think about the plants.
Yeah.
So I think you have it, and just want to bring it out a little stronger because, as Paul said, what Erik said, this is the timing is really right, and we need to bring out these conclusions. But we also need to bring out the limitations of the existing ways of dealing with it, and that's linked to the paradigms of knowledge and to the factors we need to include in how we understand market organizations and so on. So I think this is some of the more extended kind of implications of your study also. So this is what you get when you invite me. So this is my these were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have a bit of time for some questions for tutorial. I only have one on my list. Are there anyone else who have forgotten to contact me during the break? I don't normally ask, but we do have a bit of time. That is duly noted. Yeah. As I said, that is duly noted. Mr. Anders Anderson, you would like to ask a question to Peter.
Thank you. Peter, I would like 3 very different answers on the following question. And I don't know the answer, but I would like that you make 3 very different. I know at least 2 I could guess on. Why here in Ringkøbing did the 9 megawatt engine not start when the prices in the upward regulating power market went to 1,000 Danish kroner? Yesterday.
Yesterday. History. So yesterday. Okay. Yeah.
In that hour, the price went to 1,000 Danish kroner.
Yeah.
Why didn't the engine start?
Well, and you want 3 different answers.
3 because I can only guess on 2. So if you have it will be fine.
Yeah. Okay. I can give you the first answer is someone forgot to put in here. That is the first answer.
Yeah, that was one of mine. They forgot to make the bidding.
Yeah. The other one was maybe they put in a bid that was higher. I don't think that's significantly likely, but it could be that they expected much more solar here maybe, but they have some storage, so that's unlikely. But in principle, someone could have put in a bid that was higher than this. And the third one, well, I can't think of a third one.
Oh, then I had a second.
Oh,
It could be out for maintenance.
that is true. Yeah, of course. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
But it is just to show that when speaking about the possibilities to earn money in balancing for these small plants, it's a lot of psychology, that they are simply not skilled enough, or they don't focus enough on being precise in their biddings and lose a lot of money. And for me, it's an extremely important part of speaking about how to survive, that you shall know to use more effort on optimizing your biddings. That was then the next question. We have noticed that 1/3 of the downward regulation here in West Denmark that the transmission system operator has performed 1/3 of the downward regulation outside the market as special regulation, as pay-as-bid market. I think we need to begin to deal with what to do about it. Suddenly, that he uses the distributed plants and the wind turbines outside the market. But we try to get the market work, the methods you have developed for biddings into balancing market. How can they work when suddenly he takes 1/3 of the balancing out of the market and go for special regulation due to some wind farms north of Hamburg?
Yeah.
Well, we need to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. I mean, right now it's because they, of course, have had a very nice agreement for the Germans with the Germans about how they can then use the Danish or the territory control to help them balance down their electricity demand until they get the grid up going. So of course we have to understand that this is I agree with you, this is a problem, because if you have a balance, you have a market of balancing reserve, and you say this is our rules. If you adhere to that, this is how we balance things. And then you take 1/3 of that, that's a lot of capacity out of it. There's some good reasons for it on a small scale, but when you take 1/3 of it and say this, we settle differently, we don't use the rules. I mean, that's a problem, and I'm not sure exactly why they're allowed to do it. For maybe someone just haven't complained to the EU.
I think we should make a complaint to the regulatory authority, because it's a dirty game, changing the games when you are playing the play.
Yeah, they just change the rules.
I think we should consider to make one of the plants complaint.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask Ringkøbing, I guess, or...
We have a guy here from Ringkøbing. He could probably provide a complaint.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anders? Were you finished?
Yes.
Then I have Lotte Rasmussen from Neas.
Well, now I sort of already touched the subject, but I was going to ask you if you knew what had happened, especially within the last year, that could change some of the rules. But now Anders already said it. It's the special regulation.
Yeah. But
maybe you can try to explain what it is, and we know why it happens and what the rules are.
I mean, I can at least do it on the perspective I understand it. I've looked a bit into the thesis also, but the special regulation is basically in the territory control reserve. We normally, of course, set it depending on the marginal price. But in the rules, there is also a possibility if we cannot set a marginal price simply because we don't have sufficient. We set a special regulation where you just paid as you bid. And the problem with that is, if you bid in with your marginal price and you get paid what you bid, you don't earn any money. There's no incentive for you to be there. You just get paid for your costs, nothing else. Only the marginal costs, nothing else. So there's no incentive to such extent to participate on the long term. So you have a different bidding strategy in the margin depending on the pay bid. So if you put it all with a special regulation, the problem is, of course, how do we then deal with that we have much more going on in special regulation than the marginal system, and should we then start to change our bid? Because that will just make it more expensive when it then settles marginally. So that's the problem for the perspective of CTP plant. Should they start to change their bid in order to make up for the fact that 1/3 is base bid? For society in Denmark, I mean, it's a problem that you take some of this out and utilize it differently, because you take up probably the cheaper, and then when we start to have to use activation, we will have to use margin or use more expensive units. And it's my understanding that the reason is that they have an agreement with Germany, that because the Germans cannot get rid of their electricity to North Germany, cannot get it to South Germany, and when they have wind, we have wind, that they are allowed to make this trading beforehand and say we need this amount of downward regulation in your Danish system, because they do not downward regulate the wind turbines. So that's my understanding of how it functions, and this is the reason. So it's an agreement, and it's partly because the Germans, there are some internal congestion problems that's not reflected in the wholesale, because it's one area.
I think that's the reason too. But don't you think that shouldn't they bid in with a higher price than the maximum price, because they already should allow for some earnings also in regulating power markets? I mean, I hope they bid in with a price that's higher.
Yeah, I mean, it should at least cover their costs, and you can then ask what is their cost.
At least.
Yeah, at least their cost, and you can then ask what is their cost when they don't know if it's 15 minutes or an hour of operation compared to the start cost, and how you then put that out. But in principle, the theoretical principle is that the most optimal strategy is to bid your marginal costs only, and then hope for in a marginal system, and then hope for a more expensive one. The problem when you talk about the TED control is you don't exactly know necessarily what your costs are, because you would have to have one start, 15 minutes, shut down, turn on again, 30 minutes later. And then you have suddenly 2 starts, and you have a very short amount of period to cover this cost you have from the start. So, of course, when you look at practice, and then you look at theory, there is a discrepancy, because it will just be easy just to put a bit more on your normal marginal cost, and then say, okay, now at least we certainly cover these costs, regardless of how we then activate it. And I think if we then have to deal with this 1/3 as bid situation, I think they should put more into the marginal price from their perspective, because that's going to be the income they will gain, because 1/3 is a lot of capacity to take out for this special regulation. I forgot the question. I think I covered what you asked.
Then I will take the opportunity to ask the last question. First, I have a kind of a hypothesis you could reflect on, and then a question afterwards. My hypothesis is that the energy market structure that we have in Denmark is not really designed for renewable energy, at least not the kind of renewable energy that we have. And what we see are a number of modifications to a system which was originally designed for thermal systems, where you have like nice production curves, price production curves, and basically we're trying to remedy such a market to accommodate for renewable energy. So that's kind of my hypothesis. And then the question is that suitable? Can we fix that system to the extent that we can have 100% renewable energy systems, or should we start from scratch? Because it seems to me that you're trying to fix something. You're trying desperately to make the existing system fix rather than starting from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That could be an issue, problem also. I mean, but saying that it's only built for the fossil, it's not entirely true, because this is like Nord Pool is built in Norway, where we have the hydro. Yeah, it acts as fossil because we have some very nice we have some very nice graphs for bidding structures, bidding strategies into that, where we have a different price depending on with different production depending on the price. So they're much more similar in that regard to a large power plant. So yeah, I think there is an issue here, and I think it's a problem. Whether or not we should put in a completely different market structure compared to the wholesale curve. I think that's also one of the things we should discuss. I mean, I think there are some good things about the marginal system,
We should not discuss it now. You should tell us
Yeah.
what we should do.
Now that's going forward. I thought you said this is something I should reflect
Oh,
on.
sorry.
So now I reflect and then we discuss further. So of course the marginal system has this advantage that we activate those with the smallest marginal cost first, the lowest marginal cost first, shortest marginal cost first. So that's kind of a good approach as such. The problem of course then comes when we only have one type of marginal cost, 0. I mean, then the price also becomes 0, but it still has a value. So how do we then value that? I don't have a great answer for it. Pay-as-bid could be an answer. There is still some problems with that as I see it, at least for the perspective of the small participants in that market structure.
Thank you very much. I think we should give Peter a hand and then we should move to the other.